A thwarted terror attack in Michigan brings the fallout of an overseas war directly to American soil.
And over in the Senate, a presidential veto threat over voter IDs is threatening to paralyze the entire congressional agenda right ahead of the midterms.
I'm Paige.
And I'm Reed.
You're listening to Floor Notes. We're starting with the House floor today, because the debate there connects directly to the incident in Michigan last Tuesday, March 12th.
Right. The attempted attack on Temple Israel in West Bloomfield.
Exactly. We heard a very quiet, very serious House chamber today as Democratic Representative Haley Stevens of Michigan spoke about what her district is going through.
For context, this was the incident where a 41-year-old man named Ayman Muhammad Ghazali drove a truck loaded with gasoline and fireworks into the synagogue, while over 100 children and staff were inside.
The active shooter training and the private security guards prevented mass casualties. The attacker exchanged gunfire, got stuck in a hallway, and ultimately took his own life. But lawmakers are heavily focused on the motivation behind this. The FBI classified it as a targeted act of anti-Semitic violence. And it happened just 1 week after an Israeli airstrike in Lebanon killed members of the attacker's family.
Which is exactly the kind of domestic blowback from the 2026 Lebanon war and the broader conflict with Iran that security officials have been monitoring. The geopolitical landscape is spilling over into local communities.
Here is how Representative Stevens put it on the floor today. Quote, "No one should have to fear gathering at a synagogue, sending their kids to religious school, or simply practicing their faith."
She is asking for federal intervention. Specifically, she pointed out that the security guards who saved lives at Temple Israel were only there because of private funding. She wants Congress to urgently fund the nonprofit security grant program to protect houses of worship.
But Congress is also pulling a different lever to address the broader overseas conflict, the Enhanced Iran Sanctions Act. The House passed it today as a direct response to the administration's recent military actions, including Operation Epic Fury.
The central goal of the bill is to choke off the revenue Iran uses to fund regional proxies. And they are doing that by expanding secondary sanctions on Iran's oil and petrochemical sectors.
Which is a significant escalation in economic pressure.
Think of secondary sanctions as a ripple effect. It's not just the U.S. saying, "We won't buy your oil." It's the U.S. telling foreign shipping companies, port operators, and insurers, if you help process, refine, or transport Iranian oil, you lose access to the U.S. financial system.
The legislation also expands the State Department's Rewards for Justice program to include bounties for information on individuals who evade these sanctions. It's a comprehensive net.
It does include some specific exemptions, though. It allows for humanitarian assistance, like food, medicine, and medical devices.
Right, and it includes exceptions for activities involving vessel crew safety. It also establishes a framework for the president to waive sanctions under very strict certification requirements, so there is some diplomatic flexibility built in.
Republican Representative Young Kim of California managed the floor debate, and she outlined the strategy clearly. Quote, "This bill sends a very clear message that the United States will not tolerate those who finance the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism."
It passed with a required 2/3 majority, but the debate wasn't without friction. You have lawmakers who are sharply divided on how the administration is conducting the war itself.
Right. Democratic Representative George Latimer of New York supported the sanctions, but used his time to criticize the administration's broader strategy. He argued that the current military posture is an impulsive war that hasn't stabilized the region.
He pointed to the domestic costs, noting that gas prices have gone up 30% and that the conflict is costing the U.S. roughly $2 billion a day.
So, you have a situation where lawmakers fundamentally disagree on the military strategy, but they are finding consensus on using financial tools to restrict the regime's resources.
And those sanctions now head over to the Senate, which brings us to our second story. The Senate is currently staring down a massive legislative traffic jam.
Traffic jam is putting it mildly. It's a high-stakes legislative hostage situation.
The issue here is the SAVE Act. It's a Republican-backed bill that would mandate proof of U.S. citizenship, like a passport or a birth certificate, in order to register to vote in federal elections.
And President Trump has drawn a very hard line. He issued a blanket veto threat, stating he will reject all unrelated legislation until the SAVE Act passes.
Which means everyday funding bills, housing legislation, measures aimed at lowering grocery costs, all of it is halted. It is a game of chicken right ahead of the 2026 midterms.
Today, Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer of New York made it clear that his caucus is not blinking. He went to the floor and delivered a very sharp condemnation.
Let me read you the key line. Quote, Senate Democrats will not let Donald Trump ram this bill through the Senate. Not this week, not next week, not ever.
That is a door slamming shut.
A deadbolt turning. Schumer and the Democrats argue this isn't just a standard voter ID bill. They view it as a deliberate effort to disenfranchise voters by eliminating the most common ways people register.
Because under the SAVE Act, you could no longer register by mail. No more voter registration drives at churches or on college campuses. No more standard motor voter registration when you get your driver's license.
And the documentation requirement is a substantial hurdle. Schumer pointed out that fewer than half of Americans have a passport, and millions don't have easy access to their birth certificate. He argued this creates significant barriers for seniors, disabled individuals, and voters in rural communities who live far from an election office.
Schumer also brought up a specific administrative mechanism in the bill that Democrats are flagging. It involves cross-referencing state voter rolls with a Department of Homeland Security database.
Yes, a system overseen by what Schumer referred to as the Doge Squad. He warned this could lead to mass, arbitrary purges of eligible voters from state rolls. The concern is that voters wouldn't even be notified of the purge until they showed up on Election Day and were turned away.
And what happens to the state election officials in all this? Democrats are warning that these last-minute changes would create a massive logistical hurdle for local election workers, who have already been preparing for the 2026 cycle using the existing rules.
On the other side of the aisle, Republicans maintain this is common-sense election security necessary to prevent non-citizen voting. They frequently point to polls showing broad public support for ID requirements.
But the tension right now is the mechanism of the veto threat. By tying the entire federal government's legislative output to this one election bill, the president is forcing a showdown.
Republicans have to decide whether to hold the line on the veto threat or figure out a way to advance other priorities. Meanwhile, Democrats are pointing out that the election laws in place for the upcoming midterms are the exact same laws that were in place for the 2024 election.
So for now, the gears of the Senate are well and truly jammed.
But beneath the headlines of war and gridlock, the House did quietly achieve something rare today.
Two things, actually. Bipartisan consensus on two completely different pieces of legislation that fix massive historical and bureaucratic blind spots.
Let's start with the 2025 HERE Act, which deals with Nazi-looted art.
This is fascinating legal territory. Back in 2016, Congress passed a law to help Holocaust survivors and their heirs recover stolen cultural heritage. We are talking about more than 100,000 items that are still missing from the 600,000 looted during the Holocaust.
Right, but since 2016, museums and private collectors have successfully used legal technicalities to get these recovery cases dismissed before they even go to trial.
Exactly. They use defenses like the Act of State Doctrine, where U.S. courts refuse to question the sovereign acts of foreign states. There was even a 2021 Supreme Court case, Federal Republic of Germany versus Philipp, where the court blocked the recovery of looted art by classifying it as a domestic taking under foreign sovereign immunity.
And time is the enemy here. The number of living Holocaust survivors is steadily declining. For the heirs, they are fighting to recover what they view as stolen family identity, not just financial assets.
So the House passed an update today that explicitly overrides those non-merits defenses. It mandates that civil claims regarding Nazi-looted property must be decided on the actual facts of the case, not procedural loopholes.
Democratic Representative Jerry Nadler of New York summed up the stakes on the floor. Quote, "While we cannot reverse the horrors of the Holocaust, we can ensure that in an American courtroom, the truth of a family's legacy carries more weight than a legal loophole."
It's a significant shift. The bill also removes the sunset provision from the 2016 law, which was set to expire in December 2026. This means defendants can no longer just drag out the litigation until the clock runs out on the statute.
The second quiet fix today was the Small Business Innovation and Economic Security Act.
Which sounds dry, but it's actually the multi-billion-dollar engine of U.S. technological competitiveness. They call it America's Seed Fund, the SBIR and STTR programs.
And that engine has been completely stalled for 5 months.
Yes, the programs expired back in September 2025. That legislative lapse paralyzed thousands of small business innovation projects across defense, health, and emerging technologies.
Democratic Representative Nydia Velasquez of New York spoke to the real-world impact of that delay today. Quote, "The lapse in authorization over the past 5 months has been excruciating and unprecedented for small firms and labs who are at the cutting edge of technology."
But the silver lining of that 5-month delay is that lawmakers used the time to negotiate some major reforms. They didn't just turn the lights back on, they rewired the House.
Explain the Strategic Breakthrough Awards, because that's a brand new feature.
It is. So in the tech world, there's something called the Valley of Death. It's the precarious phase where a small business has a successful prototype, but they don't have the massive capital needed to scale it up for commercialization or government procurement.
The idea just dies on the vine.
Exactly. So this bill creates Strategic Breakthrough Awards of up to $30 million over 4 years, provided the company can secure matching funds. It is literally designed to build a financial bridge over that valley of death.
They also expanded the Technical and Business Assistance Funds, known as TABA.
Right. Previously, these funds were pretty restricted, but now companies can actually use them to hire new staff or participate in training programs like iCore to help get their products to market.
And they added some serious national security guardrails.
If the federal government is funding cutting-edge tech, they want to ensure foreign adversaries aren't infiltrating it. The bill requires agencies to vet applicants against strict security lists from the Departments of Homeland Security, Treasury, Defense, and Commerce.
It's an instance of Congress looking long-term. They reauthorized the programs through September 2031, which gives these small businesses the long-term certainty they need.
So, amid all the friction and veto threats, the legislative machinery did manage to move forward today on some critical issues.
Before we go, I want to circle back to the attempted attack on Temple Israel in Michigan.
Yeah.
When the building was evacuated, the children, the staff, and the fleeing Jewish congregants were ushered across the street to the Shenandoah Country Club.
I saw this. It's an incredible detail.
They were offered immediate shelter, food, and a safe place to hold their Shabbat services. And what makes this so poignant is that the country club was founded by Chaldean Iraqi immigrants, people who had themselves fled persecution.
It's a quiet, profound reminder. Even as overseas wars threaten to fracture communities here at home, the shared American experience of seeking refuge remains a powerfully unifying force.
That's Floor Notes for today.
Keep looking for those connections. We'll be back next session.